Welcome back, everybody. Representative Paul Hodes getting some criticism recently for his extensive use of the so-called franking privilege. It allows congressmen to send mail to their constituents at taxpayer expense. Adam Sexton has more.
It's called a frank. Taxpayer-financed mail members of Congress send to their constituents. According to the National Taxpayers Union, Congressman Paul Hodes has already spent more than $133,000 on the mailings this year.
Well, I think the congressman is proud of the communication he sent to to the people that he represents. He believes it's important to stay in touch.
The New Hampshire GOP is attacking Hodes over the mailing, pointing to the fact that his Republican predecessor, Charlie Bass, spent about $13,000 on franking in all of 2006.
Paul Hodes is doing it at nearly 10 times the rate of his predecessor, whom he criticized for this kind of thing. So he went to Washington to change it, but in fact he so quickly adopted Washington's ways as his own.
Republican Party Chairman Fergus Cullen also argues that the frank too closely resembles a campaign ad. At first glance, some have the same reaction.
It looks like a campaign advertisement to me.
But after Hodes' constituent Brett Minahan reads beyond the front page, he changes his mind.
It's information that people should have and know about.
Others say the subject of the mailing, gas prices, is what makes them think it is campaign-related.
Covering the situation that he's covering here. You know, it can't help but be, because it's something we're all facing.
All franks are vetted by a bipartisan commission of Democrats and Republicans, which gave the okay to Hodes' most recent mailing.
It is something that some voters might react to and not like in the context of the overall campaign, but it's something I think that they would see most other members doing.
A couple of familiar faces right there. Let me throw this to all of you. How much influence, I guess, can franks have on an election or on a race, I guess?
Well, I can tell you in a race where there's a real differential in the amount of money between the two opponents, it can certainly make a difference. And this has raised a few eyebrows. It's a lot of money for a freshman senator, a freshman congressman to be spending on mailers. You know, obviously they make the case that this is them communicating their message, but you know, it's no surprise that around 95% of incumbents get reelected to Congress, and this is one of those built-in institutional advantages that they have over opponents. So in a race where there's a real difficulty for the opponent to raise money, this is a built-in advantage for the incumbent.
And you had mentioned there before that he seems to be getting into the Washington spirit down there. Why did you say that?
Well, the fact that these mailings are in fact banned within 90 days of an election suggests that they have a strong political component to them, that they are in fact election-related. Paul Hodes has spent over his one term in Congress nearly $250,000 sending more than 1 million pieces of taxpayer-funded campaign mail to people in his district, using, I might add, a targeted voter list supplied by the New Hampshire Democratic Party, also at taxpayer expense. These used to go to postal patrons. A member of Congress represents everyone in their district, whether they're older or younger than 18, registered to vote or not, whether they actually vote or not. And Paul Hodes is sending these to targeted voters and hasn't disclosed who they're going to.
You know, I think that what Fergus and what some people may not be used to is having a congressman in the 2nd District who works really, really hard and does a lot. And yeah, he sent out a lot more mail than his predecessor has. He's also had a lot more town hall meetings. He's missed, I think, 6 votes out of the 1,600 votes, maybe 7 votes out of the 1,600 votes. There are only 8 members of Congress out of 435 who have a better voting record than he does. He's here regularly. He's contacting constituents around the district. And, you know, every congressional office is given an allotment of how much money they can spend. His is none particularly higher or lower than other members of Congress who have a similar district. He's choosing to use his communicating with his constituents. And I think, frankly, that we should be glad that we have a congressman who's working this hard. It's actually paying results for New Hampshire. I mean, he was elected president of the freshman class of congressmen. He got this new Northern Border Economic Development Commission passed and signed into law. That stuff matters, and when you have a hard worker, it makes a difference.
But is there confusion?
If he didn't spend the money, it would go back to the taxpayer. So the fact that he's got an allotment that he chooses to spend on mail when the option is he could be giving it back to the taxpayer is also significant.
Well, we've got to think back, too, you know, these are issues that have made voters very angry in the past. There have been, you know, thinking back to a lot of congressional issues that tend to make voters angry, especially during times of economic trouble. where your pocketbook might be getting strained, your gas prices are high. There's a fine line between communicating and looking like you're taking advantage of the perks of incumbency. And that's where this is a little bit risky, I think. The fact that it's been picked up on by the media and that these are high gloss, expensive materials to produce and send out. That's where I think it may be overreaching a little bit. It's a little bit different than a letter that's just black and white on the congressman's letterhead. That might be a more typical franked mail piece, but this is a high gloss brochure, and that's where, you know, it is legal, again, just like what we talked about in the first segment. Yeah. This is legal, this is current law, he's allowed to do it, it's fine. But if voters think he's going too far, they're going to question his judgment and whether it's politically motivated. So it's an ethical issue, and it's either okay for voters or it's not, and we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some of the folks you were interviewing there were looking at it and saying, look, this is informative stuff. I mean, the sorts of mail he's sending is things like information about when tax rebates are coming, so that folks know to look out for them in the mail, information about upcoming town hall meetings when he's going to be in their area, or things that they can do to get more actively involved in some of these issues. I mean, yeah, he works really hard. He's pretty aggressive. And yeah, I think if he sent a letter, it'd be cheaper. I think a lot of people may not see it, frankly. I mean, it takes a lot to kind of break through and make sure people know what's going on.
But would the average voter, I guess, know the difference between this, a frank, and this, an actual, I guess, campaign piece of literature?
I don't know if they would. It seemed like some of the ones that you talked to, once they looked at it, they saw that it was good, informative public information. But that's why there are rules like this has to be signed off by Republicans. I mean, if this was a campaign piece, these are people who do this professionally. If it was, they actually limit how many times you can say the word "I" in a piece and how big your picture can be. And I mean, if this was a campaign mailer, they would say, no, this can't work.
Sure, Washington insiders protecting Washington insiders. I mean, Paul Hodes is working exceptionally hard at using taxpayer dollars to promote himself. That's what he's doing.
But members of both parties do use this, right?
That's right, and we just saw that Charlie Bass did it at 10% the rate that Paul Hodes has been doing it. It's an abuse, it's crying out for reform, and it's another sign of Paul Hodes having gone Washington.